Well, welcome everybody. This is our afternoon session. We have with us today Alex Smith, who is the manager of the Strategic Planning and Special Projects Office of the Office of Secretary of Human Services Department. And she's going to cover for us today some of the wonderful data sets that the New Mexico Human Services Department has. And I don't know, so this will be the first time that we've had Alex present with us. And let me go ahead and turn this over to Alex.
Thanks, Susan, and hi, everyone. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. I hope you all had a nice holiday last week. Susan, I hope it's all right. I've taken the liberty and sort of expanded sort of the scope of my discussion to be more about sort of just HSD's journey to become more of an evidence-based, data-driven organization. And I titled my presentation Granule by Granule, Brick by Brick, because I'm an organizer, community organizer by training. And that's a saying that we often use when we're talking about building and sustaining movements. It's granule by granule, brick by brick. And this journey for becoming a data-driven organization feels the same way. And so I have just a few slides, and I really want to make this conversational, so I'll go through it quickly so we have time for discussion and questions. Before I start, before we all start together, I just want to invite you all to join me just to take a moment and acknowledge the land that we're on, the land that we live and study and work and recreate on, and that it is the ancestral lands of the original peoples of the Apache, Navajo, and Pueblo people who are still here today. I'm very grateful to be able to live in New Mexico and to just enjoy the beauty of the nature that surrounds me every day. So thank you for that. Okay, so this is my contact information. This presentation will be uploaded with all the other conference materials. If you have questions or feedback about any of the data tools that I'm going to show today, or if you're like, Alex, your data stinks, the department needs to do better, just email me, call me. I'd love to get your feedback. And so I'm going to just sort of make the case, like why we should have evidence-based policymaking, at least why we think so at the New Mexico Human Services Department. Go over some of the tools that we use to try and do that, and then have a discussion. I think the thing I should say about myself is that this is my first time presenting at this conference, and I'm a little tickled about it because if you ask my friends and family, they would say that I am not a data person. So when I got the invitation to present to this conference, I was quite pleased because I never thought I'd present about how to do database evidence policymaking at a data conference. And so I think it also speaks to my personal evolution and my sort of just, I think I'm particularly good at sort of communicating the data we produce, and I'll talk a little bit about that later, about how we tell a story. So I think one of the stories we try to tell with data at the New Mexico Human Services Department, and for those of you who may not be aware of what we do at the department, we administer programs like Medicaid, public health insurance, a number of food security benefits like the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. We have a number of behavioral health programs. We have a child support program. We are so big, in fact, that we serve 50% of all New Mexicans, and you can see the number of customers we have by county. I think our mission, and I'll touch on that in just a minute, I think what drives my sense of urgency to use data to tell a story and to use data to help our decision making is that, like this quotation here from Mahatma Gandhi, like, I think poverty is one of the worst forms of violence. The way that, I have grown up experiencing poverty as a child. I have used the programs like SNAP and Medicaid that HSD offers when I was a child and also as a young adult. So I have that personal experience. And for people who live in poverty, the impact that it has on your spirit and on your body and on your mind is very profound. And New Mexico has the third lowest per capita income in the country. And so that reflects when you look at how many people we serve at our department, and why having a social safety net available to help folks is so important. This is our mission at the Human Services Department and our 4 goals. We have this really unique tension at the Human Services Department where we really do want to promote security and economic independence for all of our customers, but we have to navigate that with the realization that right now there are people who need these safety net programs, especially considering the public health and economic impacts that have resulted from the COVID-19 pandemic. We have seen the number of customers we serve right now are the highest they have ever been, and that's directly because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we strive to deliver those high quality programs for our customers and services. We have 4 goals. I won't read them here. I will say though, that when it comes to data and when it comes to decision making, everything we do at the department, we strive to do it to directly impact and make progress in one of these 4 goals. So if we are thinking of a tactic or a strategic activity and we can't connect it to one of these 4 goals, then we're not going to do it. So these 4 goals drive everything we do. The one thing I should also say is that I think, so, well, I'll get to that later. So I think it looks like most of the folks here are in state agencies. So I think folks will be familiar with this, but if you're not, I just wanted to put this infographic that just sort of outlines in a very basic, generic way, like, how do you make policy? And, it's all about, evidence-based policy is all about being able to define and identify what your needs are. I would actually argue you do that in consultation with talking to people in your community. So this isn't exactly my personal interpretation of it. But once you know what the needs are for New Mexicans, and in the case of HSD, lower income New Mexicans, we then have to gather information. We have to get data to help us tell that story about what the situation looks like today. In response to that, we draft a policy, we implement it, and then we monitor and evaluate and change it. And so this is really important because there are really complex challenges that are just require a sense of urgency at our department. New Mexico has, I believe, the second highest suicide death rate in the country. And that is just one of the many incredible circumstances that we're being called to respond to. And so, using evidence whenever we can to further our mission and our goals and our operations is really important. For those of you who are data people, you are much more familiar with this than I am. I wanted to share this because at the Human Services Department, we are striving to get here. Like, we are striving to be able to develop and analyze and use prescriptive data. We are not there yet. And so some of the examples of the tools I'm going to show you today that we have used are you're going to see sort of the beginnings of our journey to climb these steps, to become more data-driven, to become more analytical. Most of the items that we have so far are really just descriptive. And I think that's important to note because that's where we've had to start. We did not have a lot of baseline data about behavioral health or public health insurance or just our customers. And so since 2019, approximately, we have been spending the past 2 years just arriving at that baseline descriptive data. And so I'll show some of that to you all today. This, when we're talking about performance measurement at the department, we're thinking output, outcome data, process data, because we know it helps in our grant making, our operations, our management, our administration. It helps us meet our goals. Most of our data is output data, though. Process data, I suppose we have some of that, but we are still striving to bridge that gap to have really good outcome data. And I'll talk more about that in a little bit. So I think, especially when we're talking about state government, we are funded by taxpayer dollars, and our customers are New Mexicans, the people of New Mexico. When we talk about data at the department, equity is really foundational for me. And how do we do that engagement with community early, consistently? How do we make sure that our data decision making is, represents diverse perspectives? It takes a lot of discipline and proactivity to actually seek out those perspectives and voices and have that incorporated into data decision making and our performance management. We still have a long way to go at HSC to do that, but that's something that we are committed to. And I think the final thing I wanted to mention, sort of my little intro, is the importance of, and I don't know how much this is sort of talked about in your circles or in this conference, but I think one of the reasons why I never felt like I was a data person was because I feel like I have personally been negatively impacted by the use of data. And so there's a lot of great literature out there about what it means to decolonize research and evidence. Essentially, how do you center the worldviews of non-Western and marginalized people? Because for much of Western research, it's been conducted through Westerners. And sometimes the outcomes of those research perpetuate inaccurate stereotypes. They focus on negative issues. They pathologize communities and populations. And so that, I think, was one of the things that steered me away from a career that was more data-driven. This is something that we also keep in mind at the Human Services Department, particularly in our behavioral health work, because we have a lot of areas of improvement for improving outcomes for our Native communities. But I just wanted to bring up this perspective as well. Okay, so now I'm going to just give you or show you a couple examples of our evolution at the Human Services Department when it comes to data. We have a behavioral health collaborative, and there's like at least a dozen different state agencies, probably your agency, for those state agency folks on the call are probably represented in this collaborative. And these questions you see here reflect that very beginning stage. We don't even know what to measure here. So the goal is, how do we build community-based behavioral health services for kids and families? That's the goal. That's what we know we want to achieve. But these questions you see here are designed to help the collaborative members just think of what to measure. We don't know what to measure yet, to help us, understand, are we achieving this goal? So the collaborative had a meeting a couple months ago where, they considered these questions, and they're developing metrics and measures now. And so I think when we talk about policymaking and government, that's often where we fundamentally start. We know the goal we want to achieve, but we often don't know how to get there. And so the first step in doing that is just asking ourselves some questions that help us better envision what we want that future state to look like. So that's very beginning. So I think the data book, which was mentioned in the description for this session, and some of you may be familiar with. And I do want to thank UNM, and they allowed an opportunity for me to survey some folks to get their feedback about the data book, which was very helpful. So thank you for that. The data book is point in time data, and I sort of see it as like a photograph, like a snapshot in time. And the first edition of it was developed in 2020. The 2022 book will come out in January, and the 2021 book has like 350 pages that look like this about lots of different kind of data. And the reason why we did this is because we needed a place to, like, one place we know we could go to that just had a lot of that baseline. Where are we at? What's our current capacity? What is the lived experience of New Mexicans today? What is that? How can we find that? And so it has a lot of data like this. There's also a series of US maps where you can see, instead of counties here, it'll be states, and you can see where New Mexico ranks. If you ever wanted to know how much Medicaid expenditures were spent in each county, here you go. It tells you right here. And so legislators find it very helpful because it gives them a better understanding of the impact of our programs on their constituents. For researchers, grant writers, other state agency folks too have found this helpful. And so we take all of that information in those maps and we compile it into a county fact sheet. And so to just make like a nice 2-page document that someone could just grab and see it all on one page. And so this is a snapshot for Sierra County. We also have some other information like program enrollment, program information here too. And so this is most of this is output data, but this is our attempt to just sort of tell that story about where we're at right now. Another tool we have is our Human Services Department online performance scorecard. I'll show you the website in just a minute, but there's a lot of measures on the scorecard. And the reason why we wanted to do this is because we just thought, particularly since we're funded with taxpayer money, that we have a responsibility to be transparent about our performance. And good, bad, neutral, we need to take that opportunity to inform the public about how we're doing. And it also really gives us an opportunity to think about, to highlight those performance measures that are most critical to meeting our strategic objectives. And so let me share a different screen. Oh, I closed it. I apologize. It'll just take me just a second to open it. So to get to our scorecard, there's a link to it in that slide, but you simply just go to our homepage here and click on scorecard. It will take you to it. And you can see there's drop-down menus for like families and children, or maybe if you're interested in goal 2 of HSD, and that's how we communicate to the public and promote transparency. Goal 3 is related to IT. Goal 4 is our own sort of internal staff development goal. I'll go here as well. And so if we were really intentional, I will also say there's a lot of work that we can do to improve the scorecard. So if you have feedback about the language, the layout, please email me or call me or ask me a question. But in originally designing the scorecard, we wanted to have the measures, the names of the measures be structured in a way as it was coming from the voice of our customer. And so that meant, to the extent that we can't use acronyms, we can't use technical language, we can't use jargon. Like, we want a lay audience to be able to understand the data that they're looking at. And I sort of felt like that's important if we're trying to be transparent, to have that level of accessibility. And so, for example, this is how good is my managed care organization working with providers to ensure my child has 6 well-child visits. The green lines often in our scorecard measures represent a target that we're trying to reach. So you can see that here. And we use Tableau to put this data together. And we often will have an arrow that indicates, are we trying to see what is desirable, an upward trend or a downward trend? This is a tool and another tool we use to try to make the interpretation of the data more accessible for folks. There's an explanation of the data, what is the numerator, what's the denominator, what's the target, what's the data source. Each of our measures have that as well. And so, and then finally, if you have a question about this specific measure, you have the name of the person you can click on and send them an email and do that. And we also have a feedback form here. And so I think the scorecard is pretty cool. It helps us tell a story. And for those folks who work in state agencies are required to report quarterly on certain measures that are outlined in the Accountability in Government Act. And we submit those performance updates to the Legislative Finance Committee and to the Department of Finance and Administration. We have also decided traditionally those updates are submitted in a spreadsheet or a Word document. It's a very static format. But we have taken all those Accountability in Government Act measures and put them online on our scorecard too. That way, if somebody on the Legislative Finance Committee or their staff want to know how we're doing on these statutorily required reporting measures, they can see that as well. So that's here. I'm going a little fast, but I'm just trying to save time for discussion. So also on the scorecard, you can see the sort of next iteration of where we're trying to go at the Human Services Department. We call these our social impact measures, and we are trying to quantify more in outcome data, so moving from outputs to outcome, the social impact of our programs. Now, I'll be honest, I think we were able to calculate the average meal cost, using readily existing data. And we've calculated that since January 2021, we were able to provide more than 430 million meals to New Mexicans through the SNAP program. That's a big deal. And I think that's something that we're really proud of at the department. It attests to the need, to the food security need of people in New Mexico. And I think it attests to our department doing the work that it needs to do, and to the federal support and the state funded support that we get. These other measures, I think, don't quite translate to the outcome measures that we're trying to strive to. I would say there's somewhere in between output and outcome, but this was something that we launched maybe just 4 months ago. And so we update it every month, and you can see it on our scorecard page or our homepage. And we're constantly thinking of, how we tell that better story. What is actually the outcome of our programs that we have at the department? So if folks have feedback about that, I'd be interested to hear that as well. I think the final tool we have at our disposal isn't actually a technological tool. It's just a meeting that we have every quarter with our leadership team and our staff. And we meet to review those measures on our online department scorecard. And we have these meetings to determine, are there any measures where we are off target? If so, what is what are we trying to do to actually be on target? What are the interventions and actions we're going to take as a department to do that? And we use that to, if there are certain measures that update at certain times of the year that are really important, we'll talk about that. But most of the meeting is used to talk about how can we make our measures better. And so what you see on the left is a measure related to goal 2, which is our improving our public trust of the department. And so this measure is how many contacts with HSD do people like me make through websites or social media. Our target was like, I don't know, we were trying to get 650,000 people to contact us online. And you can see how we did here. It kind of jags across. But then we started having these quarterly meetings just this year, I think in March or April. So this is all relatively new. At our August meeting, we were like, this measure doesn't tell us anything. This really isn't helping us meet our goal. Like, we really don't know if we're meeting the public trust, and we really don't know if we're reaching people. We intuitively know that most of our customers prefer to reach us using digital means like email, chat, or just submitting applications online. Like going to applying for SNAP or Medicaid in person in an HSD office is not the preference for most of our customers. We know that intuitively, but we got to have the data to prove it. And so between our summer meeting and our most recent meeting, which was just a couple weeks ago, we've been working on okay, how do we tell this better story? And so this measure that you see on the right, we think does that. And so what you're looking at here, this green line is our target. We want 80% of all HSD customer contacts to be digital. What I mean by that is online chat, text, email, visits to our online portals. This blue line tells you where we're at, sort of in the aggregate, how many of our contacts are digital contacts. This bar chart then breaks down the types of contact by specific contact. And so this orange here is in-person or mail contacts. This lighter blue is a phone call. And then the darker blue is the digital contact. And so these meetings that we have every quarter, I think, are really helpful because it just gives us space to figure out, okay, is our data working for us? Is our data helping us tell the story we need to tell to make the decisions that we need? And if not, how do we change it to help us get a better understanding of what's happening in the current environment? And so I just thought this was a pretty cool example of something we've just done. Okay, so this is my last slide, and then I'll turn over to questions. I just wanted to share some closing thoughts. The move to an evidence-based, data-driven culture at HSD is taking a very long time, at least to me. It's taking several years, and it's very iterative. It requires patience of all of us. I think one of the shifts that we have had to do at the department, there are a lot of people who think of the process of updating data or reviewing data or coming up with new data measures gets in the way of their work. And I think what we're trying to do with the department is say, hey, this will actually help you in your work. Let's sort of have a paradigm shift and think about how we use data differently. And then, I've mentioned this before, but we have a really long way to go when we're thinking about equity, data accessibility, continuing to move to outcomes, predicted data, and then how do we communicate this data effectively? How do we tell a story? How do we make it available to people? How do we make it visible to people? And in our case at the department, describe why it's so important that we serve lower income New Mexicans and serve them effectively. So that is it. I will take any questions or comments, any feedback. Thank you for welcoming a self-ascribed non-data person to your data conference this year, and I might have to change that aspect of my identity now. So yeah, I don't know, Susan, how we want to do Q&A, but
so
yeah.
we Justin, go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Hi, thank you so much. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
I just wanted to say I love the data book. I've used it each year that you've brought it out. The only thing is kind of wishful thinking, but I wish that I could easier access the data that I'm visually seeing. Like the PDF is great, and it's a large, zip file PDF, and that's wonderful, and it's great to look at. But if I want to have a link to the data, even a link to like the source data or somewhere that I can grab a table from, like the steps that I have to take from seeing the data in the data book and the actual access to the data is, I know it's a point in time and I know that it's a work in progress, but that's the only thing I wish I was wishful more of, that I had easier access to each data point that is being provided.
Yeah, that's a really good piece of feedback. I'll tell you, the data that we use for the data book comes from a lot of different sources.
I know. Like I said, it's wishful thinking.
But it makes me think about how we might be able to have those links. And so, like, we're literally finalizing the 2022 book now, and the least I can do is relay that feedback and see what the team and I can come up with. And I also should have mentioned there's like 30 people at HSD who put that book together. And
I know. I like I said, I know that it's a work in progress, and it's a wonderful. Like I said, I downloaded it each year and I look it over, but the demand for data is so fast, and the amount of steps that I have to go in between seeing something that's very key indicator and then having the source of that data, just the steps in between,
Yeah, no, yeah, I understand, because when I'm looking at things too, I often just want to see the raw data that was used to create the thing I'm looking at. And so thanks for sharing your feedback. And I was mentioning the team of people that helped me put it together simply just to acknowledge them for their hard work.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I can only imagine the amount of data collecting involved in that in the first place. So yeah. Thank you.
I'm just going to mention, Justin, and I'll put a link to IBIS, because a lot of the data points that are in the data book, and there are a few that aren't, are actually in IBIS too. And that's you know that IBIS is the data,
yes.
is that data portal that they have out there.
Yeah.
For the
and I'm just learning Tableau too, so I know that I'm also just learning at the same time too. So it's all it's wonderful to see the progress that the data book has made. So
Thank you.
Hey, I even knew part of the answer. So the one piece I actually hadn't ever used before is that scorecard, and that's really kind of a cool tool. When did you guys bring up the scorecard? Was that done this year or last year?
The scorecard was brought online about a year ago. Okay. And so when we first launched it, it had just those measures organized by HSD strategic goal. We uploaded and added all of those accountability and government act measures this year. And so we've got, I think, more than 60 measures that are actually online on that scorecard. Some of them are updated monthly, some quarterly, some are annual. It's dependent on the data that we're using.
And that's a cool thing to note. So I do have maybe kind of a follow-on question, because I also know that you occasionally do some white papers, like you have a special research question or something, and sometimes you publish that. Is there a place on your website where that's collected? I know the tough questions, huh?
No, I don't have the answers to that question. I'm going to presume that we don't have it in an organized, like sort of in a dedicated spot on our website, unfortunately. If there's one you're looking for in particular, you can always just email me. I can help you track it down. And I think to Justin's comment, if you're ever, if if one of you all are ever in a pinch to try and find some of that raw data that's in the data book, you can always email me and I can try to help. So that's not the ideal option, but I'm happy to assist in that in the meantime.
So if anybody else has any questions, please feel free to jump in. And if we don't see anything in a few minutes, what we'll do is I'll have Barbara finish the recording. So let me do a share of my screen. And let me thank you, Alex, for coming and speaking, because I don't think I understand enough about the health data, but I too have used the data book that you guys put out. And so I really appreciate you coming and speaking on that and talking about how I think a lot of times, and I've worked in state government, and it's really tough when people say stats just don't really mean anything to me, and let's just do work like we always do. And so it's kind of cool to hear how you guys have walked through that sort of discussion and looked at it and are making it meaningful to the work that Human Services Department is doing. And I certainly know that one of my coworkers sent me, whoa, I can't believe that people don't use data to make data decisions, or they could be so negatively impacted by data. And sometimes us who work with nothing but data, myself especially, we forget that there are other people that data is very hard for them to understand. And so it's good to see that perspective. And I appreciated you talking about that.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I think data literacy, data accessibility, data transparency and visibility, we're really striving to do all those things at the Human Services Department. It's just, it will take us a long while to get there, but I'm really proud of the progress we've made in just a couple of years. And I think to your point, Susan, I feel really called that we're not going to be able to make the case as to why lower income New Mexicans need support and need it now, unless we can marry those personal stories and community stories with quantitative and qualitative data. And so that's what we're trying to do, is leverage those tools available to us to help us better tell that story. So I appreciate everyone taking your time to listen to me chat, and my contact info is there if you have any questions in the meantime. So thank you.
And then I'll just mention to everybody who's here, our next session will be tomorrow morning at 10:30. We're going to do Census Bureau economic data, hear a little bit about the economic census data, different from the decennial census data. Andy Haight will be our speaker, and that'll be at 10:30. So Barb, are you there? I think Barb has disappeared for a minute.